Hi, I'm Dr. Frank A. Thomas, and it's my privilege to present another installment of the Preaching at Celebration series. Wow, I'm just excited to talk about preaching. I'm excited to talk about this subject right here we're going to talk about today. You know what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about one of the most common mistakes I hear in preaching when the close is not connected to the sermon. That's a big one. I want to talk about that one. In the African American preaching tradition out of which I come and I've grown and developed in, there is a tremendous amount of pressure to close the sermon. There is so much pressure. I don't know any other culture, and I've been in connection with preaching cultures around the world. I don't know any culture that has more pressure to close the sermon in an uplifting, celebrative close than African American preaching. So much so, I have seen people rip to shreds the sermon by applying a close that has nothing to do with the sermon and then has the effect of erasing what you already taught the people. That's the temptation. So in this tradition, it's possible to have a good sermon and a weak close, and many people will say it's a weak sermon. It's possible to have a weak sermon and a great close, and people will focus in and say it is a great sermon. I just want the sermon to be connected. I want the close to be connected to the sermon. You see, the function of the close is to joyfully reinforce what you already taught to people. If what you close with is not connected to the sermon, it has a tendency to erase what you taught to people. And so people are left with your close. And so people will say, well, she did a wonderful job, but what did she preach? And you don't know what she preached because you don't remember the content of the sermon, because the close erased the content of the sermon because the close was not connected to the sermon. This is one of the chief mistakes that I hear in the African American preaching tradition. I mean, it's some fabulous and some glorious preaching I hear in this African American tradition. I just simply want to warn each of you and encourage each of you to make sure that the close is connected to the sermon, or else you will erase what you taught to people. Thank you for listening to this, and I simply want to remind you that each Monday at 8 o'clock a.m. we have a Periscope call on preaching, a live Periscope call. We would love to have you be a part of our audience. We also each week load up to SoundCloud, a spiritual vitamin. Then on Monday, we release another video in this series that you're watching right now, Preaching at Celebration. And then Friday, we release videos in another series called Living Your Passion. So thank you so much for being a part of our audience. Remember, make sure your close is connected. Make sure the close, you reinforce what you already taught to people. And this is so important. I will probably come back to this later on in the series and do a whole video on this and this alone, because you cannot erase what you taught to people and expect people to remember the sermon 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So God bless you, and I'll see you next week.